From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
What's the significance of President Joe Biden's recent summit with the leaders of Japan and South Korea? Plus, President Trump floats a universal 10% tariff on every imported product to the United States. Welcome, I'm Kyle Peterson with the Wall Street Journal. We are joined today by my colleagues, columnists Bill McGurn and Kim Strassel. Welcome and happy Friday to you both. Let's start by catching up on some news that passed by amid the focus this week on the 24 Republican presidential debate in Milwaukee. That's a week ago. The Japanese Prime Minister and South Korean President were at a summit together at Camp David with President Biden. And here is a piece of what Biden said.
We've all committed to swiftly consult with each other in response to threats to any one of our countries from whatever source it occurs. That means we'll have a hotline to share information and coordinate our responses whenever there is a crisis in the region or affecting any one of our countries. And today, we've all reaffirmed our shared commitment to maintaining peace and stability in the Taiwan Straits and addressing economic coercion.
Bill, what's your read of the importance of this? I guess to my eye, these are already allied countries, but the rise of China seems to be drawing them closer together, despite some wariness and some history that they had.
That's one thing I don't think Americans appreciate that much. You know, Americans assume and have assumed for a while that the big threat is China because it's been aggressive of late and expansive. But in Asia, people are really still afraid of Japan. They have long memories of World War II, which was very cruel to other Asian countries. And they're very weary of Japan. And that's prevented them, I think, from cooperating militarily as much as they should and facing the new threats. So this is encouraging that we're at least pushing along. South Korea and Japan have the most intense feelings. And it's always come up when South Korea was hosting some of the games. They fought over would they play some in Japan. So I think people here can't underestimate that. And anything we can do to alleviate that is good. So I think the summit was a good idea.
Kim, what's your view? It seems like the substance of this trilateral summit includes talks on economic cooperation, enhancements to missile defense, annual military exercises. And to my eye, that looks like a diplomatic success for President Biden, even if you have the caveat that the U.S. still needs to be focused on pivoting some more hard power into the region.
I completely agree. There are the specifics of this, which you mentioned, the missile defense enhancements, joint military exercises. There's also a very interesting new early warning system where the countries are going to speak out if they witness anything that suggests that China is taking moves to block access to critical natural resources or somehow use supply chains as a weapon. This has obviously become more of an issue as people have focused on, for instance, the amount of semiconductors that we rely on from Taiwan. What would that mean if China were to take over that country? So I think there's simply the symbolism of it, which Bill touched on, which I think is important too, because it's sending a message as well that there is some unity about deterring China and North Korea. But it's also building on some other steps that Joe Biden has taken to firm things up and draw closer ties with other entities in the Pacific region. He's taken some steps to build on the Trump quadrilateral security dialogue with India and Australia and Japan. There's been a deal with the Philippines to build 4 new bases, including one on Luzon near Taiwan. There was the AUKUS nuclear subdeal with Australia and the UK. And so this simply, it suggests that the administration is taking a little bit more seriously the question of how it keeps its partners close and closer as China grows and North Korea, its client state, grows into more of a power.
But what still needs to be done, it seems to me, again, is a focus on that hard power. What are the weapons that are being transferred in Taiwan? Is it enough? Are there enough long-range missiles that the U.S. has in its stocks? And the attack submarines, that could be a big player if there's any move to take Taiwan. And the Navy is saying that there are not enough attack submarines. The other piece of this that I think is important to keep in mind, Bill, is trade, because the original idea of the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal was to get a group of countries together that could set rules for trade in Asia that would be rules the U.S. favors. And so they're set on American terms and not on terms that Beijing prefers. And President Trump, as we know, was not a fan of that deal or any multilateral trade deal, it seems to me. So that was not the direction that the U.S. was going under his leadership. And frankly, I've been pretty disappointed with President Biden. He has come into office and he criticized some of those stances by President Trump, but he has not really turned the trade policy around.
Let me first say, in the hard power, definitely we need to build up our allies in the region. But we have some advantages. From China's point of view, it's surrounded by hostile militaries. On its west is India, a more populous country with a pretty formidable military. Then you have Southeast Asia on the south. Then you have Japan, which has a first-class military. And you have South Korea and also, frankly, Russia. But if we can build these up, we can really contain China's power the way we want. On trade, I think this game was lost years ago. Under Obama, they proposed a Trans-Pacific Partnership. And as I recall, Joe Biden was for it then, before he was against it. And that seems to me one of the greatest tragedies in the whole trade thing. The idea simply was to have an Asian trade bloc that didn't include China, so that wouldn't be dominated by China bending the rules and exploiting them for its own use. And it would give some of these other countries a safer harbor. For example, when China retaliated against Australia on wine and beef and so forth, had this partnership, they can move around a little better. Now, when we're urging people to decouple from China, it'd be good for businesses to have more alternatives of where to go. And the Republicans are no better on that. But I think the Trans-Pacific Partnership in one of its iterations is really part of the solution for the 21st century.
Kim, what's your read of that and why the Biden administration has been so reluctant, it seems to me at least, to change the approach set by the Trump administration? For years, they were called the Trump tariffs, and maybe at this point, we need to start calling them the Trump-Biden tariffs. And remember, some of these are on the allies that we're talking about, including South Korea.
Well, I think part of it is to do with the fact that the Biden administration, while it has been taking some of these steps, it is still struggling for some kind of holistic response to the Chinese threat. And its default is to suggest that it's getting tough on China with these tariffs. And I think they're scared of the issue. They're very scared of being called weak on China. The president believes that if he were to dismantle some of these things, that would be the accusation. And the real pity of this is that what he ought to be doing is thinking about the cost of these tariffs for American consumers. And instead of focusing on that as a tool, he ought to be looking to enhance trade deals with our partners over there, which, by the way, wouldn't just help the U.S. in terms of making some of the goods that we have to get from other countries because we don't make them here in the United States cheaper for Americans, but would also make those countries less dependent supply chain wise on China and that they'd be able to get more things from us. The Democratic Party has just become the party of anti-trade, unfortunately. And so while this is a really obvious way of confronting the Chinese threat, it's just not something this Democratic White House has been willing to do.